Well, good morning. It's great to be here with you here in the room on this Sunday morning, and of course to all of our friends online, always a privilege to be gathered with you. Today, I am landing our series, Living in the Kingdom. This is the last of our messages of a part of this series. Next week, the ball is being handed over to you. We have a Testimony Sunday. We haven't had one for a little while, and so we're going to hear from one another about some of the words, some of the things that God has been doing in one another's lives, and so I'm really looking forward to that. But as I land this series, I just want to remind you of where we've been. We've looked at the Lord's Prayer for 6 weeks and spoken about the ways this prayer that Jesus gives us informs us and speaks to us about the kingdom and its role and presence in our lives and the role of prayer in our lives. And then in the weeks since then, we've been looking at a series of parables of Jesus, stories that Jesus tells. And today I'm going to land with two more brief stories, the parable of the mustard seed and the yeast. And so we're going to look at this from Matthew 13, a chapter where full of parables. Jesus is telling stories here in Matthew 13. I want to read these parables together from verse 31. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it is all worked through the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Jesus is a comedian. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? Lord of Lords, King of Kings. No, he's a comedian. He is dropping bombs of comedy here. You didn't laugh. What's wrong? Maybe you're laughing at me, Steve. I went to the comedy festival last week. I saw a comedian by the name of David O'Doherty. He's a funny guy, an Irish comedian. You might recognise him on TV. He's got this little tiny mini keyboard that he plays little jingles on. He's pretty funny. It was a great show, and my favourite part of the show was when he sang a song about the time he went to post a letter in the mailbox, letter in this hand, keys in this hand, and the keys ended up in the letterbox, and the letter stayed in his hand. And then he continued to sing about how he had to stand and wait in the rain with the letter in his hand until the mailman came and opened the letterbox. He had to confess his sin and shamefully pull his keys out and put his letter in the bag. It was hilarious. Funny story. I was in stitches listening to him tell this story. It was so believable. I could see myself doing that. Maybe as you hear it, you could imagine yourself doing that as well. I would hate to be a comedian. I would hate to try and stand up for an hour doing nothing else other than telling jokes, but I am aware of some of the fundamental rules that comedians work to, some of the formulas that they have. One of the ways you can make people laugh is if you surprise them with what you are going to say. Or you do a little switcheroo. You build them up to think that the answer or the punchline, the ending is going to be this, but you swap it and you give them something else. We know that the letter is meant to go into the mailbox, but when the keys go in, that's hilarious. It's funny. We laugh. We can relate to that. This is some of the theory of what comedians do, and this is what Jesus is doing here in the parable of the mustard seed and the parable of the yeast. But you didn't laugh. Why didn't you find it funny? Is Jesus not that good a comedian? Is he not really funny? Or are you just a tough crowd who doesn't like to laugh? You can decide. No, probably you don't get it because you're not a first century Jewish farmer. And so you don't understand, we don't quite realize the things that Jesus is doing. He is telling a joke that is ironically true. It's like the keys ending up in the mailbox instead of the letter. He is swapping some things around. And like a good comedian, as he makes the joke, his listeners know, oh, he's making a point here. There's a subtle point that he's making. And so the parable of the mustard seed, or maybe today I'll call it the joke of the mustard seed, what is Jesus saying? Well, indeed, a mustard seed is small. It is tiny. It's like a millimetre big. You can take it, you can plant it in the field, and it will grow into a plant. Yes, it can grow and multiply and become a wide field of mustard plants. Yes. Then it would grow to be a tree that birds nest in. No. That's not a mustard plant. A mustard plant goes to 3 feet tall. It's not a tree. Jesus' listeners would be like, come on, mate, what's wrong with you? Have you not been for a walk out into the fields? I'll take you right now. There's thousands of mustard plants out there ready for harvest. They're between 3 and 6 feet tall, Jesus. Birds don't nest in them, mate. What's wrong with you? And then he continues on. He tells a joke about the yeast. And he says that the kingdom is like yeast in the dough. And people are like, whoa, what's wrong with you, Jesus? And we don't get it because we're not first century Jewish people, where almost always yeast is used as an analogy for things that are bad. And here Jesus is turning the tables and saying it's something good. Yeast is something that you knead into the dough of bread, and it ferments in the bread and it spreads through the whole dough. And so the analogy is often used that this is like sin. You put a little bit of sin in your life, you think you can control it, but actually it ferments, it grows, it widens, and it will spread through your whole life, goes the analogy. And again, we kind of get that analogy theoretically, but it's not necessarily how we live our lives. I don't know, probably most of us buy our bread, we don't make it. And so the good preacher normally changes this analogy for us. And they say this parable of the yeast, or that when yeast is used in the scriptures, it's kind of like taking a little bit of dog poo, not much, just a little bit, and putting it in the brownie mixture. You might have heard this before. I've heard it dozens of times from preachers. Just a little bit, and you bake it up, you put it in the oven, it all smells good, then you cut it up, put it on the table and say, here's a brownie. It's just got a little bit of dog poo in it. Would you have it? And we're all like, no way, that's disgusting. I'd never do that. And so the good preacher then says, well, it's like sin in your life. You take a little bit and it messes the whole thing. Well done, preacher. Good job. We got the point. And so this joke is like Jesus standing up to us and saying, the kingdom of heaven is like dog poo in the brownie. And we would say, oh, what? That's meant to be a good thing, Jesus? And he would say, yeah, that's a good thing. And we think, what is wrong with you, Jesus? And these are the jokes that he is working at here in these parables. And I imagine as he finishes, the room kind of laughs a little bit and waits for the interpretation, and it goes silent. And he stares at them like I'm staring at you, and they stare back like you're staring at me. And then he just turns and walks off. And then that's it. No interpretation, no explanation. And we're left kind of like, well, what does that mean, Jesus? What are you going to say some more? We know you've just made a point, but what is your point? And so today I want to do just 2 things together. One, I want to explore what on earth is Jesus saying about the kingdom with these jokes. What is he doing with this switcheroo and kind of stirring the people, talking about mustard trees and yeast in the dough? And why on earth does he make it so hard? Why not explain it? Why not actually interpret what's happening and give us the answer? Instead, it's so awkward that the writer of Matthew feels like they need to fill the silence with a little explanation that is fulfilling a prophecy, and that's why it's awkward. Don't blame me, the author. This is Jesus and the prophets. This is why it's happening. So what is Jesus doing in these ironic jokes, and why on earth does he do it, and what does that tell us about the kingdom and following him? So first of all, the joke of the mustard seed. What is Jesus saying about the kingdom? Well, Jesus is saying that the kingdom indeed is like the smallest of mustard seeds. That when you plant it, it can grow and it can multiply and rapidly grow. Mustard plants grow quickly and they're like weeds. They spread everywhere as these tiny seeds drop and are blown by the wind and spread around. And in the same way, the kingdom can start small and in insignificant ways, but it can grow rapidly and quickly in the places where God desires it. And so Jesus' heart for us is to know to never despise or lament the kingdom when it comes in small ways. When the kingdom is present in small and seemingly insignificant ways, do not lament when the kingdom is present. Because indeed it is easy to lament the kingdom when it comes in small and insignificant ways. Indeed, it is easy to lament the kingdom when it comes in the ways that I don't want it to come into my life. You've chosen to follow Jesus and things are going well and there's some good things in there, but the problem is you're still watching porn. Why can't the kingdom come and fix that up? You're following Jesus and that's all well and good, but you're still jealous and angry. Why can't God fix that up? You're following Jesus and things are going well, but you're still anxious and depressed. You still have terrible self-worth. Why doesn't God come and fix the things up that I really want him to come and fix up? I want the kingdom here. You're following Jesus and that's all good, but you're still craving after wealth. You're following Jesus and that's all good, but the problem is your kids still haven't turned to faith and are walking away. Why won't God come in the things that I want him to come? If I had my choice, I'd do a swap and I'd exchange what he is doing for what I want him to do. It is easy to lament the kingdom when it comes in small things and in places where we wouldn't have chosen or desired it to come. And I know this to be true in my life. I constantly feel like in my life walking with Jesus that I'm kind of operating about here. It's good. I see God doing things and I can see him moving in my life. It's about here, but I really feel like by now I should be up here. I should be delivering at this level. I should be seeing God answer my prayers that are like this. I think there should be some kind of evidence at this level, but instead we kind of roll along through life at about mid-pace. And so I've learned in my life that while this can be frustrating and I feel the temptation to lament the kingdom, that God says be faithful in the small things. And I'm aware of parables like this, and so I keep trying to cultivate and invest in the things that God is doing in my life. And as I've done that over the journey, I look back today and I see God's hand at work. I see the kingdom moving in my life. I see growth and change in me. I'm not the same person that I was. I see how God is humbling and maturing and growing me and rounding off my soft edges and my rough edges and gifting me new things. And I'm aware of opportunities that God is opening up in my life as I try to be faithful to him. But nevertheless, nothing changes. I still feel like I'm kind of rolling along here and we should be there. I still feel like I could be doing better. The kingdom always feels like mustard seeds in my life, mustard plants. And it is easy to lament at any point in life the things that God is doing. And you may know this in your life as well. It is easy, no matter where we're at, to lament what God is doing and feel like it's not enough. You look at other people and say they're faithful, they're great prayers, they're gifted, they're bold, they're all fantastic. I don't see God moving in that way in my life. And so it's easy to actually shrink back from what God is doing and chase after the things that we can see results in, that we feel like we can deliver and punch at a good level, where we feel like the results are clear and the feedback is obvious. It's easy to retreat back into career or family or hobby or friendship or getting money in the bank or whatever it might be, because the results are so much clearer than the kingdom in my life. Because it comes as mustard seeds. It comes as small plants. And Jesus says, don't neglect the seemingly small and insignificant places where the kingdom comes in our midst. Because there he grows amazing things. This is the kingdom. It comes in small seeds. It grows quickly and rapidly under his hand. And so Jesus' invitation is to invest and cultivate and work with him to see remarkable things grow. Secondly, this parable is an invitation to live lives of faith. A mustard plant can indeed grow to about 6 feet tall. And this is about what people would understand a mustard plant to grow to. If you like, a mustard plant grows about this big in somebody's life. This is what you would expect. This is what you've seen. This is what you've known all of your life. It's about this big. And the invitation of Jesus is to live in a kingdom and imagine that indeed mustard plants grow into trees, not 6 feet tall plants. To live lives of faith. To live life with an orientation and an expectation that we're not in the business of mustard plants, which are this big. We're in the business of mustard trees, which are that big. We're to live outside of what we have seen and encountered and known so far. To live in expectation, to pray in expectation of what God is going to do and not remain just within the bounds of what we have seen him do up until this point. Is this making sense? It's pure logic. If God really is the creator God who made all things, then what I know of him today, no matter how wise I am, simply is not him. I can only know this much of him. The creator God who made everything has to be bigger than that. My mind cannot wrap into the size of what he is, and so therefore he is always beyond what I understand. His kingdom is always moving beyond what I have seen and known up until this point. It's an invitation to faith, to be growing and learning and understanding and seeing more constantly of him. Belief in God is not faith. Well, it's not the end of faith. It's just the start. You believe in God, brilliant, fantastic, welcome to the party. Now let's go. Believing in God is this. Faith is expecting and believing and praying, living with the lens that God is at work beyond what I have seen and known so far. And this changes everything. This is the lens we are to have in the kingdom. And so we are to pray bold prayers, to believe in different things, to celebrate things that others might lament, to be generous, to be loving, to be caring, and to look after people in ways that have expectations beyond what we have seen and known and experienced so far. This is what the kingdom is like, and this is the lens we are to take on board. But the biggest, the best, and the greatest of the kingdom, we have not yet seen. And so we pray, we imagine, we seek, and we long for the kingdom to come in ways that is beyond my experiences so far. You and I know mustard plants, they're about this big. We're to dream and imagine and pray for trees that are far beyond what we have seen and known. This is what it is like to live in the kingdom. So firstly, do not neglect the kingdom when it comes in small and seemingly insignificant ways. Secondly, we're invited in this parable or this joke to have eyes of faith and to trust that God is at work beyond what we have seen. And thirdly, we're to consider the mustard plant and what it can theoretically grow to. So a mustard plant can, theoretically, in principle, it can grow to about 20 feet tall, 5 or 6 meters. You'd never do it, but it can. You wouldn't plan it, but it can. It would be ugly. It's kind of 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. It's more like this big round bush, but it can. If a seed kind of blew off in the wind and landed in the middle of the bush in an open clearing with no plants around it and a stream running past in perfect sunshine with really fertilized ground, it theoretically can grow to about 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. And so if you were walking through the bush having a nice Sunday afternoon stroll, you could come to this clearing and see this plant and think, is that a mustard plant? That thing's huge. It is a mustard plant. That's weird. Those things are meant to be like 6 feet tall. What is going on there? Wow. I've never seen that before. That's kind of a Frankenstein plant. It's a bit of a zombie plant, but wow, there you go. It wouldn't be what you would aim for normally. And let's be honest, it's hardly a tree. 5 meters is impressive, like it's bigger than me, but that's not a tree. It's not all that big, is it? If you want a tree, plant a gum tree, man. That thing will grow to like 100 feet tall. That thing will hang over your house for decades. It'll drop leaves and branches on your house every day. You'll be cleaning the gutters weekly. Anyone else triggered? That's a tree. That's a picture of might and strength and authority. That's a tree. The birds will come and they'll have shelter in that tree. You want to plant trees? Plant a gum tree. Those things are cool. You want to see 1,000 trees? Go to a pine forest. Wow, that is cool. You want to see something amazing, an ecosystem of trees? Go to a rainforest. That is cool. Those are trees. What are you doing wasting time with mustard trees? They're ugly Frankenstein zombie type of things that really you would never let them grow to 20 feet tall. And Jesus says, yes, that's the kingdom. That's the kingdom. The kingdom, you need eyes of faith to see it and recognize it and notice its growth. And even when it comes in full, still many would lament it and joke at it and despise it. The kingdom, the mustard trees of the kingdom that we are called to seek after are not like the trees of this world. We count different metrics. We long for different things. We count success in different ways. We imagine different futures. We are called to an alternate life, to a different culture, to a different way of understanding. We look for beauty in different things. We don't count trees the way that our world counts trees. As beautiful as the gum tree is, we're on about mustard trees. And so the beautiful things of this world, they're great. Marble houses and thriving and growing businesses, great education, Instagrammable holidays, that's all great. Fantastic, you can enjoy them. But they're not the kingdom. Don't get them confused. They're fakes. They're frauds. They're pretenders. You can give your life to them, but you're not giving your life to the kingdom. They're fakes. We're not on about gum trees. We're on about mustard trees. We count things differently. We don't count numbers for political power or growth or wealth or anything like that. No, we're not into the numbers of people. We're into transformed lives. Amen. We're into the evidence of God in our midst at work among us, and people will think that it's strange. Even when it comes in full, they will say, what are you doing messing around there with a mustard tree? Why are you paying your workers above award wages? Why would you waste that time? You're leaving money on the table. You could make more money in your business. Why are you giving away your wealth like that? Like, you could invest it, you could use it differently. Why are you living like that? Why are you supporting that person? They're never going to pay you back. And actually, I heard them bad-mouthing you behind your back the other day. Oh, you know that they bad-mouth you. Well, why do you still keep caring for them? Why do you still keep loving them? Why would you love your enemies when you could get rid of them? The kingdom works to different metrics. The kingdom we're on about is a kingdom like a mustard tree that takes faith to see, that takes a heart of faith and a life of faith to cultivate and recognize and invest in. This week I spoke to someone who told me a story of a small little social enterprise cafe that they had planted a number of years ago. And they told me this story that there's this kind of backwater suburb that they'd kind of got in contact with. And it used to be a thriving suburb of industry, massive factories, enormous business, huge supply chains in this suburb. And then it all got too expensive, too hard, and so the industry packed up, left, and went overseas, and so the suburb became a shell of its previous self. All of the jobs disappeared, all of the factories, all of the supply chain shut down, and this suburb became a backwater, a hole with no jobs, no economy, nothing happening. And there's this square in the kind of middle of the suburb that used to be this thriving shopping complex where people would go and do their shopping. And now it was this derelict square with half of the shops boarded up and closed. And people would come and sit in this square and drink through the day. And trouble would ensue, and it was a place that wasn't really safe to be in. And they thought, we should try and do something to serve this community. And so they came and they rented a shop front there that had been boarded up. The rent wasn't too high because no one wanted to rent here. They opened up a space to come and hang out in, and they made a little cafe. And people started coming and hanging out in the cafe. And this one guy came along, and my friend described him to me like this. He had kind of long black hair and full black clothes, kind of goth, rock star kind of look. And he was socially awkward, he was quiet, he was difficult to engage with, he was a little bit weird, but nevertheless, he came each day. And he'd sit there for hours, just quietly in the corner, just watching. Day after day after day, nothing else to do. Eventually, one day, people left their table messy, so he picked up the coffee cups and took them to the counter. The next day, he wiped some tables. The next day, he went out the back and did some dishes, just started helping out around the place. And gradually, bit by bit, he became part of the team in this cafe. My friend told me this week that all these years later, he now makes up part of the leadership team of this little cafe. He still dresses the same. He still looks the same. He's still kind of socially awkward and quiet and a little bit difficult to work with. The suburb is still a hole. The shop fronts are still boarded up around them. There's still problems with alcohol and crime. The suburb has by no means been changed because of their presence. And someone might say, okay, that's cool. Nice story. But seriously, you, cafe manager, you are incredible. You are amazingly gifted. You are educated. You are skilled. What are you doing wasting time in this backwater suburb? You've helped one person. You could be helping dozens of people. You could set up cafes in like Brighton and Toorak. You could be making tons of money. You could be helping all sorts of people. Why are you working in this place that is hardly making a difference? Why? Because it's the kingdom breaking through. We're not after gum trees. We're after mustard plants. We're called to cultivate and look towards and invest in the things that God's heart is behind. This is a story of the kingdom in our midst. This is a story of the kingdom at work in and through this cafe in the life of somebody whose life is being transformed by God and his faithful followers being obedient to the things he is inviting them to. This is a story of the kingdom, and you need eyes of faith to recognize it, yes? You need eyes of faith and a heart of faith to see and know and understand, wow, that's God at work. That's the kingdom in our midst. This is what Jesus invites us to dream and long for and look towards. And the joke of the yeast, well, very similar. It's an invitation to invest in faith. Because as the yeast spreads through the dough, you can't tell any difference between the dough which has yeast and the dough which doesn't. They look exactly the same. That is, until the heat is turned on. And then things look very different. The dough with yeast rises, and the dough without it remains flat and turns into flatbread. The difference is very big once the heat comes on, once the circumstances change, once God moves. Indeed, the dough with yeast in it, it changes. And this is what it's like to live in the kingdom, to invest and cultivate. Even when it looks like nothing is changing, nothing is moving, we are called to be people of faith. And so we're called not to neglect the kingdom when it comes in seemingly small ways. We're invited to have eyes of faith. We're invited to seek after the things that others may despise and look down on and reject. We're after mustard trees, yes, not gum trees as beautiful as they are. But what does this mean? What does it have to do with following Jesus in the sense of why does he make it so hard? Why make it so hard, Jesus? Because I've had to do hours of study this week, pulling apart this text, reading commentaries. I've had to get on botany websites to understand plants and make sure that I'm confident that mustard trees they're not actual gum trees. I've done a lot of research this week. Why make it so hard, Jesus? Why make it so hard? Because here's the thing, I know that in 3 weeks, you're going to forget most of what I just said. And even more embarrassingly, in 6 weeks, I'm going to forget most of what I just said. And I'll be reading the scriptures in the second half of this year, Matthew 13, and I'll think, I think I preached on that once. What's it about? And I'll open up some books, I'll do some more reading, I'll do some more thinking, and I'll kind of piece it back together, and I'll come back with some slightly different thoughts about this text. Jesus, why make it so hard? Why not just put your interpretation, your translation of it, the answer right there? Just make it easy for us. Well, funnily enough, that's kind of what it's like, in my experience at least, of following Jesus. I feel like sometimes I've got it, I've worked it out, I've understood, I've got all of the pieces together. Yes, I'm killing it, I'm crushing it, here we go. And next week I've forgotten what's going on, I'm not sure again. Something crossed my path and I don't really understand. I kind of feel like Jesus asks us to follow him, to seek him, to chase after him. Because it's a relationship, not a formula. It's a relationship, not a textbook. It's a walk with God, not an exam to pass. So the key is not in the answers, it's in the journey of following him. He puts the answer in this text, well, it's about that big and I'm not doing any more work, am I? I've got the answer. What more trust do I need? We're invited to be people of faith. People of relationship, people of trust who are seeking and constantly chasing after him. People who experience him in the scriptures just the same as the Jesus who we walk with in life. I'm called to follow him, to learn from him, to grow in him. Jesus says, come follow me and I'll give you an abundant life, not an easy life. An abundant life. It's very different to an easy life. An easy life is having everything handed to you on a silver platter. An abundant life is one where we seek him. An abundant life involves going to the gym, putting in some work, growing and strengthening in and through him. We are called to be a people who live in the kingdom, who seek after the kingdom, who live with huge faith, prayers and expectations and longings. In this kingdom, we don't strive and achieve. Instead, we seek and we receive. We don't strive and achieve. No, we seek and receive. We seek Jesus. We seek Jesus beyond what we have known and we receive from him. We seek in faith and we receive as we notice the sprouts of mustard seeds shooting through the soil. We seek this kingdom and we growingly receive it's not about me. It's not about how good I am. It's not about my strength. It's not about achieving. It's about seeking. Friends, will you be a committed follower of Jesus who seeks him, who prays bold prayers of faith? Will you be somebody who seeks him in the great moments of life and in the valleys and the hardships and the challenges? Will you seek Jesus? This is what it looks like to follow him. New Hope, I see God doing great things in our midst. I see God working in the lives of many people. I see God moving us forward. And I don't know what it's going to look like. It's beyond what I've seen and known up until this point in my life. But I see seeds poking through the soil. I see evidence of the kingdom in our midst. And I want to be a follower who seeks that, who chases after that, who longs and prays and believes for more of that, yes? I want to be a part of an army of followers who live with that lens. That whether it makes sense today or not, it doesn't change the culture and the mode that we live in. That we would be faithful followers of Jesus who live wholly in the kingdom, who live lives of faith and expect that God is doing more than we have seen until this point, and who confidently declare, I'm not after the trees that the world is after. I'm not cultivating the kind of things that this world will cultivate. No, I'm looking for the things that's on Jesus' heart. I'm chasing after the things of the kingdom that Jesus is all about. Would this be the definition of your life, friend? Would this be the life that you lead as you seek Jesus? Would you stand together and let's pray? Father God, I thank you so much that you are present and you are here among us. I thank you for your profound love, your compassion and your care, which breaks through in remarkable and marvelous ways. Jesus, give us eyes of faith to notice the small things that you are indeed already doing. Give us eyes of faith to recognize and to invest there. Give us the courage to not be swayed by the things that might seem attractive and fun, but to chase after the things that are on your heart. And Jesus, when it's hard and confusing, we give you our all. In this moment of worship, we just open our hearts and our lives to you, Jesus. We seek you. We lean on you. And we open our lives to receive fully from you. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.